Hi, I'm Christian Peter with Dark Horse Commercial, and thanks for tuning in to the next installment of the Ultimate Guide for Miami Warehouse Owners: How to Sell for Top Dollar Fast. Today, we're going to be talking about maximizing value with strategic preparation. So, when we talk about maximizing value, is there are things that owners can do in order to get ready for sale. As the old saying goes, as I mentioned before, you only get one chance to make a first impression. And by doing the right things strategically beforehand, preparing in advance of the sale, you'll be able to get the most amount of money in your pocket as possible. So let's talk about cleaning, right? Repairs, simple cosmetic upgrades. Now, I'm not telling you have to do a complete renovation or anything like that. But if there's something that you know can be done and can be done relatively easily, go ahead and take care of that. If it's something that can be done in a weekend or is relatively inexpensive, what I always tell people is I use the rule of thumb is like one weekend. If it can be done in one weekend, then I would take care of it. Okay. As far as in upgrades and that sort of thing. Very few things, a coat of paint goes a long way. You could have someone come out and put a coat of paint, or at the very least, touch up, maybe fix some cracks in stucco, that type of thing. It doesn't have to be too much. One thing to be aware of, though, and I mentioned it a little bit in the last video, in the last installment, was a lot of people, if there's a lot of cleaning and repairs and cosmetic upgrades to be done, what they're going to do 100 times out of 100 is they're going to overestimate the cost of these. So if there's something simple that you can do to get it out so it doesn't even show up on some inspection checklist, the better off you'll be. Let's talk about environmental reports. Okay. So what happens oftentimes, especially with industrial properties, you're going to have a potential buyer do what's called a phase one environmental inspection. And basically what they're looking for is what's been going on in the area. Okay. Has that impacted the property? What kind of tenants have you had in the property over the years? Has that impacted the property? Yes or no? They might do air samples, they might do groundwater samples, they might do soil samples, depending, right? And the best that you can hope for is basically a phase one inspection. The good thing is, if your phase one inspection is recent enough, some environmental companies will recertify it. If you go back to the same company and it might be relatively inexpensive, the best thing you can do before someone comes, if you, let's say, purchased the property 3 or 4 years ago, I think 5 years might be kind of about the cutoff. But if you purchased a property 3 or 4 years ago, you might be able to have your environmental company that you had when you purchased, that you utilized when you purchased it, recertify it for a fraction of the cost. And guess what? You hand a clean phase one inspection to a potential buyer, and that's going to increase your probability of getting the property sold to them. And it's also going to increase their confidence in purchasing the property. So they're not going to try to retrade or lower the sale price at the end of due diligence, which is something that happens all the time. Now, let's say, for instance, you go through a phase one and they say, hey, listen, there's a few things that we need to take a look at, and you're going through a phase two, right? That can slow down, or I should say that could slow the potential buyer down when they're going to buy. So if there's anything you can do in advance, by all means, this will slow the process down, because if they find something, they might open up Pandora's box. You just don't know what they're going to find. So if there's anything you can do to avoid it, especially with recertifying a phase one or even a phase two, by all means, provide that information. Next up, how to boost NOI in the 6 months before listing. Now, if you had 6 months to boost NOI, there's a few simple kind of tweaks you can do. If you had more time, 1, 2, or maybe even 3 years, that would be the ultimate. But before we go into the NOI discussion, I want to just share with you some very, very simple mathematical ways of looking at NOI. Okay. And what we'll do is we'll just use, for example, a 10 cap, just because it's really, really easy math. Okay. So a lot of people talk about, well, I want to maximize my value, but sometimes it's hard to understand like how much the NOI, how a small increase in NOI can really drastically affect the building. Here's what I mean. So if you just take a 10 cap, for example, okay, and the way the math works is for every $1 you increase your NOI, that increases the value of the property by $10. Okay, so if there's a way for you to increase your NOI, okay, now remember, the formula is basically rent comes in the form, money comes in the form of rents, money goes out in the form of operating expenses. Whatever's left over is your NOI. Or better yet, if you listen to my previous videos and you got your lease over to a triple net lease, even better. Money comes in the form of rents. There are no operating expenses because the tenants are paying for all of them, and then you're left with your gross rent equals your NOI. But let's just say it's a standard equation. Your money comes in, your rents come in, you subtract out your operating expenses, your insurance, your common area maintenance, as well as your property taxes. You remove those out, and what's left over is your net operating income. It is so important for you to get that net operating income as high as possible before you go to sell the property, because when people buy at a cap rate, okay, a cap rate is nothing more than, if you're used to the stock market, it's a multiple, right? So for a 10 cap, the multiple is 10. For an 8 cap, the multiple is 12 and a half. For a 5 cap, the multiple is 20, right? So the point of all of it is, and all you do is to figure those out, is 100 divided by whatever the cap rate is. So 100 divided by 10 cap is a 10 multiple. 100 divided by an 8 cap is a 12 and a half multiple. What that means, if you're selling in today's market, possibly at an 8 cap, right? If people are borrowing money at a 6.5 APR and they're going to buy a building with a 1.5 of spread, you're looking at about an 8 cap. So for every dollar you increase your NOI, that's $12.50 in increased value. So $1,000 of extra NOI equals a huge amount. It equals $12,500 in value. Make sense? Okay. So ways that you can boost the NOI, there's a few simple things. Okay. Hopefully along the way, you've been boosting the rents. Okay. But if you haven't, just go ahead and increase. I like to do what I call the Starbucks effect. And what it is, most people don't think twice about spending $5 at Starbucks for a cup of coffee. Okay. Or maybe smokers, they'll spend 6, 7, 8, $10 for a pack of cigarettes. Right. So what I call it like the Starbucks tax. So if you take $5 a day and you multiply that by 30 days, that's like $150 extra. Okay. $150 extra for per month. And if you annualize that, that's $1,800 for the year. And if you have 10 extra, I should say, if you have 10 tenants, okay, just $5 a day extra. And we'll do the math real quick. Okay. Very, very simple. So 1,800 a year times your 10 tenants, that's 18,000. Okay. Watch this. If you're selling at an 8 cap, all right, you're going to multiply that by 12.5 for a, oops, sorry. Let's see. It's going to be 18,000. All right. 10 tenants at 1,800 per year. All right. Times 12.5 equals, you just increased the value of your property by 225,000. Make sense? Okay. The other way you can do it is 18,000 divide by 0.08. Okay. And it's the same, 225,000. So the point I want you to understand is, if you only have 6 months, okay, maybe you won't be able to renew everybody, but you'll be able to renew the tenants a portion, and if you just did just $5 a day, $150 a month adds up to major money, especially if you have a large property and a lot of tenants. Maybe you want to increase it more than that, but at the very, very least, you should feel very comfortable with doing these small increases. The other thing that you can do, and I was managing about 125 tenants when we sold portions of a portfolio off. And one thing we did beforehand was, don't be afraid to give away free rent. Don't be afraid to put in carpet, put in that extra sink, maybe renovate the bathroom, maybe pop in a kitchenette, whatever. Okay, upgrade the tile, the VCT tile, whatever it is. Don't be afraid to make those investments. Why? That month is going to pass no matter what. And the few $1,000s that you spent in maybe a kitchen upgrade, or $5,000 you spent in carpet or VCT, whatever, that's gone. But for every dollar extra in rent that you get because you renovated the space, or you gave them a break or whatever, that contract rent, for every extra dollar, In an 8 cap situation, you're going to get an extra $12.50. For every extra dollar of NOI in a 10 cap situation, you're going to get $10, right? So there's a huge, huge, huge incentive. And the more landlords understand this when they become sellers, right, the more you're going to be able to maximize the value. I hope that makes sense and hope that's a little illuminating for you. And then finally, let's talk about the power of clean financials, rent rolls, and permits, right? We talked in one of the previous videos in terms of having like sloppy records and it's one of the mistakes that kill value. The cleaner your financials are, the more dependable they are, the more easily readable they are, and the more trustworthy they are in the mind of the buyer. So the more you can have things, the perfect would be QuickBooks, right? If you could have something QuickBooks and you just print out, your P&L as an example, and you can print out your rent rolls and that sort of thing. You can redact certain information if you don't feel comfortable sharing too much. But the most important thing you can do is have financials that are easy to read. Because I've dealt with people that it's in a notebook, right? I've dealt with people that it's in their head, right? And unfortunately, that worked for them for a long time. But the next person coming along, if they don't feel like they can really depend on the numbers, they're going to underestimate because they're not going to know how reliable they are. But if you are printing financials out of on a spreadsheet or out of QuickBooks, even better, and your rent rolls out of there, even better. It makes the financials very legible, trustworthy, and easy to make investment decisions from. And then finally, permits. If you have open permits, close them out. You do not want a deal to be teetering on whether or not you can get that permit that you've known about for 3 years for some, renovation that you did when a tenant moved in to get closed out. There's nothing worse than that. And I've had many, many, many closings. And sometimes it's not even your fault. I've had it where the city forgot to check a box. They came out and they inspected it and they just didn't check the right box or put it in the system. So I had to call for a reinspection for this building that I was selling. So just know that it does happen. If there's anything that you know about, make sure you take care of it sooner than later, because when you do get it under contract, you're going to want to make sure that everything goes as smoothly as possible so you can get the most amount of money in your pocket as possible. And that is it for this segment. So we look forward to seeing you on the next segment where we're going to be talking about pricing your property to create a bidding war. This is one of my favorites. This is the part where the rubber meets the road, where we show you exactly how we get the maximum amount of money in your pocket as possible. Look forward to seeing you then. And by the way, if you're looking to just know what your property is worth, go ahead and drop by at www.darkhorse-commercial.com. If you're seeing this on YouTube, we'll go ahead and put a link down below to our website. But go ahead and click right when you land on our website. There's a button to get a free valuation. Be sure to click on that, fill out your information, and I'll reach out to you so we can tell you what your building is worth in today's market. And we can go over our strategic roadmap in terms of getting you the most amount of your dollar in your pocket as quickly as possible. Look forward to seeing you. Talk to you soon.